our elbows. These are the things we know. We know. If people want to wear a mask, that is okay. These are the things we know that prevents you from speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.
Welcome to Speaking Moistly, everybody. It is me, Greg Wycliffe, and of course, the one and only Mark Peralvis. How are you today, Mark?
I'm doing very, very well, sir. It's beautiful outside. Spring has sprung. People's allergies are bothering them, right? I'm noticing people with their eyes and they're sniffing away and all that kind of stuff. So, it's really May in Ontario and that's going on.
Yeah, well, the natural world, of course, is beautiful as ever, but
undeniable.
Yeah, but the political world is ugly here in Canada.
On fire, some would say.
Absolutely disgusting. And the Liberal Party convention happened this weekend, so there's a couple of things we're going to be going over there. There was obviously the wildfires going on, and there's the whole persona non grata with this Chinese diplomat, which we might get into as well, but we'll see. Let's start with this freedom of press issue, which is certainly concerning.
It sure is. There was a piece I showed yesterday on my show it was Andy Lee talking about how there's a coordinated effort to dream up this hate speech crisis. So they're saying that hate crime is increasing, and because hate crime is increasing, they redefined what hate crime was in 2019 or something like that. But because hate crime is increasing, they say they have to come in with these draconian speech laws to prevent these awful hate crimes that are increasing, except that the data doesn't back up the hate crimes increasing, right? And so Andy Lee did this whole thread talking about how they're manufacturing through polls and government NGOs, government-funded NGOs, manufacturing this hate crisis in order to justify all of these speech crackdowns that we're seeing, from Bill C-18 to Bill C-11 to Bill C-36. And then around the world, we're seeing Ireland crackdown, we're seeing the UK crackdown, yep. Blue states, and I don't know about red states, but certainly everywhere where you would expect freedom of speech to be a hot topic or to be protected. Right, in Canada, it's the top of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In the United States, it's the First Amendment, free speech. So these things used to be very clearly an integral, central part of our democracy, and now it's that's pretty hateful, and somebody might get offended. And if they get offended, you're going to jail, buddy. That's a $50,000 fine. How dare you say that on this social media thing? And that's pretty wild. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it's kind of clear what the plan is, right? Because the people opening their big fat mouths has kind of been the foil in everything that's happened over the past 3 years, is people being able to speak freely, people being able to do their own research.
Say no. Yeah.
Yeah. People being able to say no, people being able to, dare to go against the consensus, whether that's the scientific consensus or the public consensus or what the poll said or what the government said. And not only is it, so important for their agenda, but think about it. It is humiliating when you can have people speaking freely. It's humiliating for these people because you are able to sometimes simply, sometimes in a more incisive way, completely pick apart the stuff that they're pushing forth. And of course, why wouldn't it be the top thing on their schedule of to-do lists? Because it's they are still kind of trying to scurry by everything that's happened over the past 3 years, and yes. They don't want people talking about it anymore. They're trying to not talk about it. So of course, stopping freedom of speech is on the top of their to-do list. And this is something I've been following for a long time. And you're absolutely right when you say that they're trying to construct it through polls and everything. I actually have a YouTube video on my channel where I got this this Facebook ad served to me saying, "Hey, I hate speech in Canada. Oh my God, the hate is coming for you." And I filled it out as for fun. And essentially, and this was kind of in the news cycle a few months ago, but essentially, if you say, "I don't think the government needs to be controlling hate," then they don't let you do the survey. So they
get removed.
You get removed
yes.
completely from the survey. So, to say that they're trying to skew the data is kind of an understatement. And it really is a massive topic, but let's get into the one that's happening right now
Sure.
here in Canada. So this is from Evan Dyer saying the Liberal Party of Canada passed a non-binding motion at its LPC 23 convention that would ban all of the current reporting on Chinese interference and threats, put journalism under government control, and spell the end of freedom of the press in Canada. And this item says, request the government explore options to hold online information services accountable for the veracity of material published on their platforms and to limit publication only to material whose sources can be traced. Man.
So that kills. So the China, and what's kind of being said here is the SNC Lavalin scandal, the China scandal, what's rocking the current Liberal government at its core, really, and they don't seem worried at all. The current scandals wouldn't be reported at all because they wouldn't have public sources, and the sources wouldn't be traceable or verifiable or anything like that. They're saying, and it's all true. Like from SNC Lavalin, Jody Wilson-Raybould was very clear about how bad things were, and right now CSIS leaking to the Canadian public is an indication of how bad things really are. And in response, this compromised government is trying to crack down on our ability to hold them accountable through talking about it online in like backwater channels. We're not even huge channels. Like, really, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. And I want to, what pisses me off about all of this is it really is a small fringe minority. It really is this tiny minority of bureaucrats that are pushing this forth, of wanting to control the press or limit speech or be able to, really it comes down to this weird sort of sick sort of obsession of wanting tyrannical control over the press. Like if you talk to 99.9% of regular people, they're going to be like, why would we want to do that? But when you're a bloodthirsty, adrenochrome chugging bureaucrat in Canada, like that is at the top of your list. However, I want to just feature a few things that Michael Geist said. I love Michael Geist. He says, lots of coverage of the Liberal Party resolution that raises enormous freedom of press concerns. This article suggests escalating concern within Pablo Rodriguez's office with two statements in the same afternoon. And it's this tweet in particular I want to comment on. And this article points to concerns from the CCLA, News Media Canada, and others. As I note, you can't celebrate World Press Freedom Day on Wednesday and then pass a resolution that undermines the freedom of the press on Saturday. Well,
welcome to Canada. Yes, you can.
Yeah. Well, clearly you can. Clearly you can. That's what's just happened. And to be frank, again, I love Michael Geist, but it's this sort of attitude that, JJ McCullough has this attitude. A lot of other pundits, like I would even maybe call out True North for having this attitude of sort of like, well, they can't do that. They're acting so hypocritical and unfair. Like, they cheated. They can't do that. Well, they did do that, and it's ruining our way of life. And they keep cheating and they keep lying and they keep stealing. And are we just going to sit here and keep telling ourselves, well, they broke the rules. They broke the rules. They're not allowed to do that. Well, yeah, they keep doing it though. So when are we going to kind of escalate the urgency or escalate the sort of the threat in our minds that this group of people imposes upon us, and dare I say, kind of attribute their character to be kind of, evil, malicious, authoritarian in some capacity? Like, I'm so tired of this naivete from people who get it and understand it and see it. Oh, well, he can't just flagrantly lie. Like, well, he is.
See, watching people like Andrew Coyne wake up and say like, oh my gosh, can you believe what's happening? It's like, dude, they were censoring people like me 2-3 years ago, like, and viciously, and smearing people with baseless smears, right? Just unbelievable lies. And so it is very concerning when, and so what I think, and we've talked about this before, the government has done a really good job at saying, if you speak out, you are going to lose your job. If you don't get vaccinated, you're going to lose your job. If you don't do what we say, we are going to make your life a living hell. And so they've put the fear of real consequences into people to the degree where friendships, families have been fractured because some people say, well, if you say something like, I think my body belongs to me, and it seems like Some people are getting injured from this, or it seems like we don't have enough information for it to be deemed safe yet, and I'm going to wait. That was enough for people to say you're freedomer or something like that. You're an anti-vaxxer. There was a whole, I'm sure there was a group of people who sat in a room to focus group, which was the better insult. You know what I mean? Or maybe they just do that on Twitter now rather than
grandma killer.
Yeah, right, exactly. So like they branded people. They were absolutely vicious to bully people into doing this. And it is one of the things that is unforgivable. Even if you started to stand up to this, they would zero in and start trying to break you down, unless we all stand up together and say, no, you're not cutting off the parks. We're not doing that. Everybody says, no, we're not doing that. You can go after yourself.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point too. They were workshopping, ways to dehumanize and segregate society. Yes. And I think the
politicians were
right. But back to this point, what I'm like, this criticism, not really a criticism, just kind of me like being upset with the tone of like, hey, they can't do that. It's like, dude, are we really that naive to not understand that they have a plan? Like that this was planned and that they're meticulously sort of like, imposing this stuff upon us. Like, like what is with this attitude of like this almost like dumb foundry of, oh, wow. Like, it's like what they're doing are these two completely disconnected things that have nothing to do with one and they don't compute. It's like, dude, like they have an agenda. They're following an agenda. And if you can employ pattern recognition skills, you would see that this actually is nothing new at all. In fact, there's a lot of things that happened from the trucker convoy, which is the same sort of, you can't do that. Yeah, but they did do that in a democratic country. I'm not going to list everything because we're not going to beat a dead horse here. I'm sure if people watching are familiar, but
yeah. Man. Well, I mean, like the people, hopefully everybody stands up all at once and says no, just like they did with the playgrounds. But more likely the idea of the incredulity and like we're so shocked and stuff, like that's supposed to be, it used to be enough to unseat a government if the press was against you, right? But the press isn't even really against any of this. I haven't seen much reported on the NCI either. But anyway, that's a different topic.
No, I haven't seen much reported. I mean, it's of course it's similar because we're talking about free press, and you even said it. You're like we don't really even have that when it comes to the legacy media anymore because they are gratefully subsidized. I guess we'll just bring it into this tweet right here, which is super relevant. This is Senator Leo. How do you say that?
Kousakis?
Yeah, there you go. Your Greek coming in handy. Here we go.
Ta-da.
This is dangerous territory. Is there a feeling that through media bailouts and Bill C-18, the Liberal Party has now effectively bought its critics and has the right to silence them? Liberals' policy proposals amount to alarming government intervention.
I've said a lot that the idea that you cater to your biggest customer is not new. And if it used to be your biggest customer was the paying public because the internet didn't exist and people needed a newspaper to tell them what was going on every day.
Sure.
Then your biggest customer was your subscription base, right? Mm-hmm. But now in the age of the internet and, you and me and everybody having Twitter and so on and so forth, the Globe and Mail has a hard time maintaining that customer base. So its biggest customer is the government. And so if the government says, we really don't like those stories that make us look bad. We really like those stories that make other people look bad. Do more of those. Although I will say somebody like Sam Cooper, right? So like legacy media is kind of crap, but Sam Cooper, he's Global News and he broke the CSIS whistleblower stories. And that's something, you know what I mean? So legacy media, while it's crap, if you broke the story.
That's the exception though. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like the time they actually do real journalism, it's the exception of all the other propaganda and total just sort of misinformation. They do all the things that they accuse everyone else of: misinformation, disinformation.
Okay, but without Global News, like without the global tag or something like that, like what would happen to Hirsch? I think it was Seymour Hirsch, but that could be wrong. But he was the guy who reported the U.S. was the one who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and he did it in a blog. He did it in his own blog. It was a meticulously sourced piece, and most people who read it think that he's probably right. But that wasn't a slam dunk. You know what I mean? And he got pilloried for it. He got attacked for it. And so like I'm not saying there's a place for legacy media, but in the masses, in the minds of the masses, Global News, Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, these names carry weight still. And not to say I don't know why, but if it's not published and reported in those places, it hasn't happened to most people. You know what I mean? Most people they dismiss it until they get bit in the ass by the reality of the situation.
Yeah, but I mean that's the same thing. Like kind of like talking to the cops. Like, yeah, there's still some good cops. There's some great cops. I know cops, and I have beers with cops. And it's like, yeah, well, if you don't get vaccinated and you're at the wrong protest, the cops are still going to beat the shit out of you, aren't they? Like, it doesn't really matter when push comes to shove. Like, just because there's been like a good article here or there. That doesn't mean that they all get to go off the hook, because for every actual interesting breaking story that they do push out, how many are they snuffing? How many are they throwing under the rug? How many are they completely ignoring? And the answer is, especially after the pandemic, a lot. There's entire topics, there's entire categories of stories that they're deciding we are not going to cover any of this. This whole phenomena doesn't exist to us.
Increased deaths? What increased deaths? We're not going to report on that. Like, yeah, all that kind of stuff. And you're not wrong. It's not even just like they will report on one aspect of like a story, but they won't report on the rest of it. You know what I mean? Like, they'll imply with their reporting that the government is correct or whatever. But when honestly, you dig into it, it's like, oh, that's not really true.
This is going to sound like a kind of like a weird take, but I almost resent when there are these breaking stories that come from the Globe and Mail, for example, because then everyone gets to go, oh, isn't our news media just so fantastic? Isn't the Globe and Mail just such journalistic integrity? And then everyone like rubs their bits, everyone's circle jerking, and it's like this has been the one breaking thing that's happened. Like, are you kidding me? Like, we're just gonna kind of give them this excuse now because.
Well, I think that they're burying the lead. And I mean, like, so the legacy media will do something like, oh man, we've expelled this Chinese diplomat, which we should talk about in a minute. But they're going to ignore, we've taken away free speech in a democracy for no really good reason at all.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, that's a problem. And the reason that it works is because people will celebrate and throw accolades on, a big story that gets broken. The reality is, this story was big enough to bring down this government 2 months ago. And Jagmeet Singh is a coward who should have acted, and he didn't. And the NDP caucus is cowardly for not removing him and acting when they should have. And this whole government is invalid. The speech laws that they're enacting are invalid because of the interference, the foreign interference that is obvious at this point in time. And it drives me crazy.
And that's another great point, because what I hear there is the tone of the news media, the sort of right, like our news media has no morality. There's no moral sort of code. It's not connected to the values of freedom whatsoever. Because if it was, they would be saying the exact same things you just said, Mark. They would be like, this is illegitimate. This is completely unacceptable. Yep. And the official opposition is barely doing that. Like, they're sort of almost about to say that, like, you should resign. This is an illegitimate government, but they're still not. And it's probably because if you look through their receipts, look, this one's from, is this one from the same guy, the same, Chinese funding person? Because that was part of the same or a similar report where it's like, some conservative MPs did receive money that was funneled through the Trudeau Foundation as well. So it's like, I guess everybody's caught red-handed. So I guess this entire House of Commons is rotten.
It's invalid. And I don't see how anybody can say that the laws and the rules that they're passing that violate our basic laws in the context of Chinese interference has any validity at all. I don't understand it. And like when Pierre Poilievre, he's great. He does great conversations on the floor of the House, but he focuses on something and he doesn't talk about the rest of it. And people ask, what about the rest of it? And, silence, because it's the conservative. What about the milk mafia? You know what I mean? Like, what about the fired healthcare workers? We can't just import healthcare workers to fix the healthcare worker problem. What about all of the people who were fired who weren't vaccinated? Doesn't talk about it, right? So, but when he does talk about
mass
something,
migration? What about vaccine injuries? What about
right,
the
we're going to
authoritarian
build
thing, the political prisoners? What about the frozen bank accounts? What about any of that?
Yeah, right. And so if you got a political party that, you know, was superstar rock stars who have the ability to debate and are quick on their feet and blah, 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 all that stuff, you wouldn't get traction because the news media and the people who have been, brainwashed, the people who have been demoralized, the people who have been browbeaten about how terrible Canada is and terrible Canadians are, have been conditioned to think people who speak like we do are selling something other than just individual responsibility and freedom and self-governance and hopefully we would be able to maintain ourselves, and we have historically up till now. Why can't we again? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's frustrating.
I mean, so many institutions are just compromised at this point. That being said, it can be inspiring when one person does the right thing. So are we going to talk about this diplomat? Shall we?
Sure. We like the expulsion of the Chinese diplomat. Sure.
Yeah. Should we start with this tweet here?
Yeah. Well, do you have the Mel Jolie one? I think there was another one that I sent.
This one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
So this is from Ezra Levant. You knew about this years ago. CSIS told you it didn't bother you at all. In fact, you kept China's secret. Only when it was reported and you were embarrassed in the media did you do this. You are the Chinese asset we have to worry about. And this is Melina Jolie saying, declaring persona non grata for Mr. Zhao Wei. Essentially saying he has to leave the country in like 4 days or something like that.
Yeah. He has to. Is there a date or is it immediately?
It says
the Canadian ambassador has to get out by May 13th from China because China responded. And I think that the person non grata means that he can't use diplomatic immunity anymore so if he does something that's against the law, and I think this is true, I'm not 100% sure, but I think them not recognizing him as a diplomat anymore removes his diplomatic immunity. So if he does something against the law, he could potentially have consequences. So they're saying get out. Yeah. And that's interesting. The fact that it took 2 years is kind of concerning.
Yeah, and we talked about this before we turned the cameras on, but like the reason why I don't get too excited about this stuff is because it really feels like it's another kind of dog and pony show, almost the same way that the liberals and conservatives pretend to kind of clash back and forth when they're all really on board with a lot of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The same way now the liberals are like, yeah, we're against China. Like we really don't like China. We're going to be tough on China. Are you? Are you going to be tough on China, or is this like the bare minimum you're going to do to show the public that you're against China, and then you can continue to, fill in the blank?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting kind of quagmire that we've set up for ourselves because the government in the 90s was offshoring jobs to China. It was very difficult to set up manufacturing plants in Ontario for things that weren't something like car manufacturing or something like feeding a car manufacturing plant. But if you wanted to build a toy or like a small electronic thing, it was all offshored to China or India or some other place, right? And so now we've got a situation where I don't know what the percentage of our manufacturing that we rely on is done abroad, but we've got a situation where the people who were in charge of that in the 90s in the 90s, set it all up, and now we're in a situation where it's kind of imploding, and politically, it's not as good as we were told back then. And they're saying, "Don't pay any attention to that. Don't worry about your grocery store prices. Liberals are doing great." Right? And I mean, it's John Chrétien sending that message, and I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And I think you're right. It's another dog and pony show. Like I said, this whole government should have been dropped months ago, and this is a big enough scandal for that. It's bigger than SNC-Lavalin.
Yeah, and I guess to end it, speaking of civil servants being completely useless and incompetent, you shared a great clip of people from Grand Prairie, Alberta. We'll play just a quick clip of it to give people the idea. Residents ask what that is going on. Grand Prairie residents that had to evacuate speak out about the wildfires.
Said no. That resident with that dozer is so mad he's not here right now. I spoke to him personally this afternoon. He was scared he's gonna get arrested if he showed up. He has done more for our community than anyone on that stage. So spare me the political crap and tell us what's really going on. When we got guys offering up their $1 million pieces of equipment to come in and get the job done. Anyone? Mr. Lemieux.
Anyone?
The guy does get up and answer the question. I asked for the next part, and he does get up and answer the question. But he doesn't give a very satisfactory answer. And these people, so
obviously.
Yeah, well, he doesn't say much. And these people are expecting now to be away from their homes for weeks. They've got food in the freezers, that the power's all out. So it's all going to rot. They can't go back to their houses. So like, not only is the food going to rot, but probably maybe they have to buy a new fridge or something like that if they get back to their house at all. And I mean, it is an absolute travesty what's going on. It doesn't seem like anybody's actually trying to help. It seems like everybody's working against these poor people who've been displaced by a fire, and nobody's communicating anything. It is.
I got a response from a guy on Twitter actually, and he said, we'll just play the first bit here.
I was a wildland firefighter for 6 years, contract crew, northwestern British Columbia. I was a little hoser bitch, and then at the end there, I was a handfaller in 2018 on fires. This is normal. This is all the same stuff. Ministry in all the provinces pull this kind of crap, and then they say that they're helping. It's the same old song and dance. It never ends. And
he's basically saying it's nothing new. He's like, I've worked in wildfire before as a wildfireman, and this is nothing new. The civil servants have always been useless, and it's your own property, and they'll basically say you're not allowed to do anything about it, which is wow. Like I feel it's almost like every week when you follow Canadian politics, you stumble upon another rabbit hole of just completely absurdity, complete incompetence from civil servants. And along with that, we always have the nice side of not coleslaw, of just the media not talking about this at all, not touching it whatsoever.
Yeah. And I mean, we're misled and led to believe that, everybody's trying really hard, blah, 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 blah. And we pay for all of it. It's all wasted. Just wasted money. The amount of money across that stage, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary across that stage for all of those people to be there is unbelievable. I mean, like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. And I mean, they've got jobs and blah, 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 all that stuff, but the money there and the incompetence, we're paying for all of that. It's such a maddening thing to experience. And I think that we could do better, and it wouldn't take much to do better. But it will take a transition to remove the infiltration and the very deep roots that have been set up by who knows who, China and who else.
And I've talked about this on other podcasts recently because people are really trying to look for solutions. And I really don't think that the next election is a solution. It really comes down to people being moral and doing the right thing, because a huge part of the problem is we have so many people who are slaves to their salary, like, what, I'm just going to worry about my salary, just going to worry about me, and that's it. And then, and you have people like that on here on the stage who you can just tell by their energy that I mean, like you can almost like see this guy's like face is red on the right there, second from the right, the police officer. You can like see how red his face is, just being humiliated. Like these people know that it doesn't make sense. Like anybody who has a working brain and an IQ of over a houseplant knows, this is your own property and you're not even allowed to go back to it. Like it doesn't make sense. So,
and they'll enforce it. Like you can't even just ignore them and go anyway. Like they'll I don't know about arrest, but they won't let you in. But anyway, dude, I got to go. So this has been wonderful. I apologize.
Where can people find you?
You can check out CanadaPoly.com. I do an hour-long, at least, daily show. It's been longer recently. And I upload every day, and there's a free version and a subscriber version. So check it out.
Amazing. We love you, Mark. We'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching. By the way, we try to do this live every Tuesday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So we'll catch you next week, hopefully.
Bam. I hope so.
Talk to you soon, guys. Later.
No, it prevents you from speaking moistly. Speaking moistly. Keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly. Speaking These are the things we know. Keep 2 meters apart. What I have heard from medical experts